In this lesson, we're going to talk about making a busy photograph more paintable. All photographs, I think, to some degree, have things we have to get rid of, but we really need to think through how to make it more paintable, simplifying shapes, values, and then how to finish, what details to add, and what to leave out, because a photograph is just a place to start, and we want to combine what we see in the reference, but also what we know. Now today we want to take a look at a photograph or photographs that are busy, and we want to think about how to see them. We want to see past all the clutter, get to what's really important. Then from there we could decide to add as much detail as we want or as little, but if we can simplify it, get rid of the clutter, and decide what's the most important part of the reference and get that down first, everything becomes a lot easier. It's when we take a photograph and just mindlessly start copying it that things get too cluttered, too detailed, and then we get real frustrated and things just fall apart. They just can't work as well if we aren't able to see through all the stuff that doesn't matter. Looking at these, I want to consider first of all composition, because composition is the most important. How I would crop it to zoom in. And if you don't have Photoshop or something on the computer that crop paintings, just do it with a sketchbook. That's the way they did it for hundreds and hundreds of years. And I still use the sketchbook more than the computer, but the computer is helpful. So when I look at this is in southern Utah. Again, when you get a photograph or you're taking a photograph outside, decide where your focal point is. And for me, it could be a couple of places, and it's never or rarely an object. It's usually an area, there or right in here. Either one would work. And I want to crop it around that idea. So I'm going to make the focal point more in here. And I'm going to crop it thinking what's really unnecessary. I need some of the sky. I need some of the foreground. I want probably more foreground, background rock. I can't have half and half. I can't have half hillside here. These are different planes, and then half rock. I need to break it up so one is bigger than the other. So I'm going to go with a bigger hillside, grass, bushes, and then less rock. So that means a little less sky and a lot more of the foreground. So I'm getting rid of a lot here, but it's stuff that doesn't really matter all that much. And maybe my focal point would be over here on the right. I'm not sure which one it would be. But I think this works better compositionally because it gets rid of a lot of the clutter. You know, there's just too much going on. There's stuff I like here, and some of the parts of the cliffs up there you think would look really good in painting, and it would. But for my focal point being in this area, I need to get rid of this. It's just too far away. It doesn't do anything to help my focal point. So don't hesitate to get rid of stuff that you think would look neat in the painting. It just is not going to help it. And there's several different ways I could crop this. I just did a vertical cropping. This is more horizontal. In other words, it's longer than it is tall. And that would work too. It includes a little bit of that stuff over on the right because I want a more horizontal format. I'm focusing more now on the rocks, less on the hillside. Let's see where that is. I don't think I can get back to it. The other way, the vertical one, was more on the hillside, smaller shapes of rocks in there. And a square would work good too. Again, I can crop this a bunch of different ways. Have the focal point definitely be these tall rocks. And that would make an interesting painting. Very vertical, very tall. But that works nicely. I got more hillside than rocks. So different shapes between the hillside, rocks, and sky. And that's what the composition is doing. It's looking at different shapes, in this case 3 different shapes, kind of a squarish rectangle, a vertical rectangle like this one, and then the horizontal, the long rectangle that we had before. Then I want to see past all the clutter, and there's a lot of clutter on the hillside. I like all the color variation, and I want to simplify the variation. So I look at the dirt, which is going to be lighter and flatter on the hillside. The different grasses, there's 2 or 3 different colors in the grass, which are going to be a little darker than the dirt and a little more vertical, even though it's on a slanted plane. They're going to be a little darker than the flat dirt on the hillside. So simplifying that to just 2 values, the hillside, well, 3 including the shadows. So a dark and 2 different light values. Now color-wise, I can get as much color as I want in there, but the values are what's going to make it work. So simplifying all that, simplifying a lot of the shrubbery. Don't get enamored with this stuff that looks like you need to take a small brush and just dot. All this stuff looks like dots. And it just kills the paint. Even if you want to paint photographic, you have to simplify that. It's just too much. And our goal here is always to suggest light, not detail. So that's the last thing on my mind, is to get all that detail in there. I want the suggestion of the light on the rocks, how the light hits the shrubbery. When I look at this shrubbery, I might change the shape of it a little bit, but there's a definite dark pattern on there. Same thing here, and same thing here. And I want to get those dark shapes right. That's going to make the bushes work. It's going to make them look solid, make them stand up. And you can do it to all these. Even though I don't see a definite dark pattern on some of these, I have to put one in there to make it look 3-dimensional, because we have a flat canvas, and the only way to make it look 3-dimensional is to get a stronger contrast between the dark and light. Sometimes it's easier to see. I can see the dark on here pretty easily. You have dark and then light. Same thing on this tree. You can see the separation. Others you can't see it, but you got to force it on some of these shrubberies and trees. The rocks are pretty obvious, but there's a lot of detail. There's a lot of clutter in here. There's a lot of lighter shadows. You know, this looks like shadow, but it's in the light. I want to keep it in the light area. Get rid of all these little lights in here and just get a solid shadow on these rocks. Again, the more I work on it, the more I can break that stuff up if I want, but I don't have to. That doesn't make it a better painting by adding more detail. I went ahead and got rid of everything on here that's unnecessary. This is how I would want my block in to look. We simplify the drawing, just separate the planes, the sky plane from the vertical rocks, the vertical trees, and the slanted hillside. Get those planes separate, and then simplify everything to just a dark and a light. Now I might come back later and get some darker darks, those crevices. Obviously I wouldn't use bright red. Some darks in there, maybe a few small darks in the lights. But I want to simplify it. I want to eliminate most of that. Same thing with the trees and shrubbery. At the most, I want 2 darks, this overall dark, and then a dark accent below in here. Because it takes 2 values in the shadow to make it look 3-dimensional. And then same thing with the lights. Like I want an overall light like I have here, and then have maybe a lighter light or a darker light. So 2 values in the lights, 2 values in the dark at the most. But this works. I don't want to stop necessarily at this stage. Some artists do. They get a simplification of shape. They're suggesting the light and they just leave it. But this is a lot easier to add to or paint into this than this. Too much clutter, so I want to see it like that. Now going to another one. I didn't crop that one after I finished it. But same thing here. I could do again, think composition first. I would definitely get rid of this big tree in the front. Anytime there's a tree that goes from the top all the way off the bottom, it just cuts your canvas off. It just cuts off that part of the canvas. So I want to get that taken care of right off the bat. But then decide how much I need to get rid of here. Not as much here. I zoomed in on the camera a little more than usual. I usually take big overall shots and then crop it when I get home. Here I cropped right there on the spot. Then I want to simplify it. There is a lot of clutter everywhere. A lot of this stuff just doesn't add to anything. It breaks it up too much, way too many little darks and lights. All this stuff I want to get rid of. I might just want some detail or a little bit more detail in one area than others, but get rid of a lot of stuff. A lot of this grass and the snow makes things too busy. All this stuff in front. So really simplifying quite a bit. So that when I see it or I start blocking it in, I want to visualize the painting like this. Again, just thinking big shapes, and my focus here is the sunlight and shadow. So I've eliminated everything so the sunlight and shadow pops out the most. And same thing with this one. This eliminates all the unnecessary so that the focus becomes sunlight. I'm not trying to eliminate to make the painting boring, making it as so simplistic that there's no interest there. I'm making the interest just the sunlight and shadow. Now, the more I work on it after I get it to this stage, the more detailed it becomes. So I have to decide where I want that detail, like we talked about in previous lessons, and how much of it. But that's the simplicity, getting rid of the things that distract you from the dark and the light. There's some things in here I like, the smaller detail, the logs on the ground with the snow, a little bit of the snow on the bush here weighing the thing over, but I'm still getting rid of 90% of it, of the detail, so that I can see it real simple. Then from here I can add more detail. I can break up each of these big shapes to smaller shapes, which is what detail is. But if I don't get it to this stage first, if I see the detail too soon and I start in the detail in the drawing and I get the detail in the block in, then it becomes so tight, so picky, that I lose the sense of light and I lose interest, move on to something else. So make this your focus. It may not be what you want in the long run. You want to be able to render trees better or have better brushwork, but this is so important to be able to simplify what you see and get rid of what's unnecessary. Now, looking at a couple of paintings, this is a painting by Alexander Jacob. And it's a bit stylized. He's simplified things to only what matters. And because of the simplification, you get a real strong sense of light. If he breaks these tree shapes up with too many darks and lights, you're going to lose that sense of light. But there's some broken color, same value, different color, but not much detail. And it works real well. And he's after that simplification, not simplifying to where it looks boring, but simplifying so the shade or the light is dominant and not the detail. All these examples are very, very non-detail oriented, very design oriented. This is a painting by Maynard Dixon. Now this is very designy, and he's it's very stylized, very period oriented painting. And he's almost going more abstract and realistic. But you can see what the simplicity does. Even though I don't want to paint this posterized look, the simplicity really makes the sunlight real strong. And that's why I like a lot of his work that's like this, is because it's so simple and the composition is so strong. But it's not realistic enough for me. But the simplicity is really evident here. It makes the composition really strong. You can really tell what the light's doing. You get the feel for the sense of the time of day that you wouldn't get if you focus on detail. This is another Maynard Dixon, a little more natural looking, but the simplicity is just, he's taken it down to the basic stuff. Still looks a little period oriented, looks 30, 40-ish style-wise, but his values and colors are very good and very simple, not much detail. And there's not much attention paid to edges, which he likes that more hard-edged style, but works very well. Really a strong sense of light. Using temperature, the really grayish warm colors and the grayish cool colors to suggest the light there. Now there's not much paint quality either. His lights are fairly thin. Darks are thinner also. But real nice sense of dark. This is how you want to see your subject. This is a Marion Wachtel. She was a California Impressionist, early mid-20th century. And you can see the simplicity. There's just no detail. The detail would be the houses, smaller individual trees back in there. But everything is big and simple. 2 values in it, well, maybe 3 values in the trees. Simple, dark, and light shapes. Everything's geared towards that simplicity. There's some detail, and I think enough detail. You don't have to add more. It still works. But everything gets bluer as it goes back, a muted blue. And everything gets warmer as it comes forward, unless it's in the shadow. But if you compare light with light, the shadows in the distance are real cool. Shadows in the foreground are cool, but they're warmer than the shadows in the background. So even shadows get a little warmer as they come forward. And the light areas are the same way. The lights are stronger up front. And these are stronger light areas. Then they get gradually a little weaker or muted, and then bluer as they fade away. So everything gets warmer as it comes forward, even shadows. But the simplicity is real nice there. It's another one of hers. You can see the simple she's got 2 darks and then a couple of lights. So 2 dark values, 2 light values. Trunks are pretty much 2 darks, 1 light. Everything's very simple and shape oriented. You can see the shadow pattern here in the shadow on the tree, then winding around to the shadows in the background. Very strong, simple shadow pattern that makes the painting read so much better. Really work through the idea of how to simplify them. Even if your paintings look a little clunky, you want to simplify the shapes and then go ahead and compose the shapes a little bit better than the photograph. Make a little bit better composition. And that could be just simple raising some trees up a little bit higher or turning something a different direction a little bit. You don't have to make up a lot of things in the painting. Just adjust things to create a better composition.